Houston Heights, Texas. The rain is pouring down in absolute sheets. Two brothers from Portugal, who traveled across the world to watch their national team play in the 2026 World Cup, are completely stranded on the flooded street. They ignored the severe weather warnings to chase their football schedule, and now they are stuck in a massive storm. They are vulnerable, disoriented, and far from home. If you read the European sports papers today, or if you listen to the elite football pundits broadcasting from their comfortable studios in London and Paris, you would think these two brothers are about to face the absolute worst of a violent, cold, and unforgiving country. You would think they are exactly where the European football establishment warned them never to go. You would expect them to be ignored, robbed, or worse. This singular moment under the Houston rain exposes the reality of the 2026 World Cup. A reality that completely shatters a massive, deliberate lie. For years, the power brokers of global football have carefully constructed a narrative. They built the manufactured stigma. They desperately wanted global fans to believe that venturing outside the traditional European football strongholds meant stepping into a lawless cultural wasteland. They sold pure fear. They painted the United States as a place completely devoid of human warmth, safety, or basic hospitality. But the event that happened next on that flooded street did not just save those two brothers from the storm. It completely destroyed the propaganda machine of the old continent. I am going to show you exactly how the European football establishment tried to manipulate your perception of this entire tournament, and why the reality on the ground right now is terrifying the institutional elites. By the end of this, you will understand the full scope of their deception, and you will see why the true power of this World Cup is not happening in the VIP suites of the stadiums, but on the local streets of the host cities. We need to talk about the most dangerous weapon in European football governance today. It is not financial fair play, and it is not broadcasting monopolies. It is pure arrogance. For decades, the governing bodies of the sport have operated under the strict assumption that they alone own the culture of football. When this tournament was awarded to the United States, a massive campaign of cultural gatekeeping began behind closed doors. The media networks across Europe did not focus on the infrastructure, the massive stadiums, or the immense logistical scale of the event. Instead, they focused entirely on generating fear. They amplified stories of crime, coldness, and danger. They wanted to create a psychological barrier in the minds of the fans. They look down on the American sporting landscape as entirely artificial. By branding the host nation as a profoundly dangerous place, they attempt to invalidate the entire tournament before the global audience can even form an opinion. It is a preemptive strike against a rival cultural market. They want to ensure that no matter how successful the event is financially, it will always be viewed as culturally inferior by the traditional fan base. Take the specific case of a football fan named Sebastian Krautz. Before he arrived for the tournament, he admitted he was genuinely terrified to travel to the United States. His mind was filled with the exact images the European press loves to broadcast globally. He was fed endless reports of shootings and rampant criminals. He genuinely believed the country was entirely unsafe for a traveling supporter. He bought into the manufactured stigma completely. You have to ask yourself why. Why does the European elite need fans like Sebastian to be deeply afraid? The answer is absolute power. Fear keeps the center of power firmly rooted in Europe. If fans believe that the rest of the world is too dangerous, too cold, or too uncivilized to host the beautiful game, then the European institutions never have to share their cultural monopoly. They can dictate the terms of global football forever. They can control the broadcasting narratives, dictate the morality of the sport, and maintain their iron grip on the global fan base. It is a highly calculated strategy of institutional control, cleverly masquerading as concern for fan safety. But then Sebastian actually arrived at the stadium in the United States. He did not find a hostile wasteland. He did not find the cold, violent dystopia he was promised by the wealthy pundits. He found a community so overwhelmingly welcoming that he broke down in happy tears right there in the stands. The contrast between the terrifying fiction sold by European media and the profound emotional reality of his actual experience is staggering. It exposes the sheer hypocrisy of the entire institutional system. This is not an isolated incident. The elites in Nyon and London desperately wanted you to believe that outside their borders there is only chaos and total indifference. They fed us this lie to protect their throne, treating us like gullible subjects who must be constantly warned about the severe dangers of the outside world. If you are as furious as I am about how these wealthy institutions manipulate our genuine love for the game to serve their own political agendas, you need to hear exactly what is happening right now across the other host cities, because the cracks in their carefully constructed narrative are rapidly turning into massive holes, and you have to see how ordinary people are tearing down this fortress of lies piece by piece. Let us look deeper at San Francisco. The European media apparatus spent months warning traveling fans to stay far away from this specific city. They painted it as a dystopian nightmare. They wanted you to picture lawless streets and total chaos. They issued these warnings with the absolute authority of an institution that believes it alone dictates reality. But then a British female tourist decided to test this official narrative. She did not bring a security detail. She brought a massive 25-foot RV. She drove this massive vehicle straight into the heart of the city, rolling down California Street early in the morning. What she found completely dismantled the terrifying picture painted by the media. The streets were immaculately clean. There was absolutely no chaos. Instead, she found herself surrounded by stunning Victorian architecture. She immediately noted that these houses looked exactly like the properties in the most elite, exclusive neighborhoods back in London. She realized in real time that the warnings were completely fabricated. If the city is this beautiful and peaceful, why did the European forums desperately want fans to avoid it? The answer is control. Alongside this total failure of propaganda in California, we must examine the reality on the ground in Texas. The narrative of fear relies on isolation. It relies on making fans feel that they are entirely alone in a hostile foreign land. But a fan who had only been living in Texas for a single week exposed the complete absurdity of this idea. He decided to test the famous local hospitality during a routine errand. He was standing in a public line. In any major European capital, standing in a line is an exercise in strict social isolation. If you attempt to speak to a stranger in London or Paris, you will be met with immediate suspicion and cold stares. But in Texas, the person standing directly in front of him simply turned around and genuinely asked how his day was going. This was not a forced interaction. It was an effortless, natural connection. He stated clearly that he felt like he was part of a massive family, even though he knew absolutely no one in the entire state. The local people actively pulled him into their community. Does this sound like the cold, terrifying country the pundits warned us about? Alongside the spotless avenues of San Francisco and the welcoming public lines in Texas, we must look at Venice Beach. Another British tourist experienced a profound cultural shock that exposed the deep social conditioning of European citizens. She was simply walking down the street when her companion, Joe, sneezed. Instantly, a total stranger turned and blessed him. Shortly after, another local woman approached her. The local woman spoke with such a familiar, warm tone to compliment her shirt that the British tourist was completely disoriented. She genuinely thought the local woman was talking to a close friend. She actually looked around, deeply confused, because her European conditioning made it entirely impossible for her to process this level of standard American friendliness. The default state in the old continent is to mind your own business and ignore everyone around you. But in America, the default state is immediate, positive engagement. The tourist realized that the American confidence, a trait heavily criticized by European media, is actually a beautiful, welcoming force. The total collapse of the manufactured stigma is not happening through official press releases or boardroom negotiations in Switzerland. It is crumbling on the everyday sidewalks. It is shattering through the simple, unsolicited kindness of strangers on the beach. Every single friendly interaction, every compliment, and every warm greeting is a direct, undeniable defiance of the institutional narrative. The people on the ground are proving that the fear-mongering was a lie, and this exact defiance, this beautiful clash between expected hostility and actual warmth, leads us directly back to that terrifying massive storm and those two Portuguese brothers trapped in the flooding streets of Houston. We must return to the pouring rain in Houston Heights. I want you to picture the exact scenario. Two brothers from Portugal are completely stranded. They are helpless, entirely without direction, and trapped under a severe weather warning that they chose to ignore to follow their football schedule. In many of the countries that loudly proclaim themselves to be the sophisticated, sacred homes of football, ignoring a stranger in distress is simply the unwritten rule of the street. If you have wealth, you protect it. If you see a problem on the street, you look away and keep walking. That is the deeply ingrained survival mechanism in cities where rigid institutional power creates massive social divides. The two brothers were bracing themselves for the absolute worst. They were waiting for the cold, unforgiving reality they were explicitly taught to expect by their own sports media. But then, the absolute unthinkable happens. A car stops in the pouring rain. This is not an official FIFA transport vehicle dispatched to save VIP guests. This is not a luxury security shuttle provided by the European governing bodies to protect their investors. It is just a total stranger, a regular, everyday citizen of Houston who sees two foreign tourists trapped in a dangerous storm. This local resident does not drive past them. This stranger pulls over, welcomes them into the car, and drives them all the way from the flooded streets of Houston Heights safely back to their accommodation in Midtown. There were no questions asked about their background. There was absolutely no payment demanded or expected. It was nothing but an act of raw, unconditional human kindness delivered exactly when it was needed most. This is the exact moment the entire institutional narrative flips completely. This is the pivot the wealthy elites never saw coming and cannot possibly defend against. The European football apparatus possesses unimaginable wealth. They can build billion-dollar stadiums with state-of-the-art facilities. They can orchestrate massive global marketing campaigns to control the image of the sport. They can dictate the television feeds sent to billions of homes. But they cannot manufacture this specific moment. They cannot buy, mandate, or regulate this profound level of organic human connection. The Portuguese brothers come from a culture that heavily prides itself on deep hospitality. They are citizens of a country known for welcoming guests. Yet they were completely and utterly overwhelmed by what happened to them in Texas. The sheer American confidence, combined with the immediate, unquestioning willingness to help strangers in a crisis, completely shattered their preconceived defenses. They realized that the warnings they heard back home were not just slightly exaggerated. The warnings were a complete and total fabrication. This rescue in Houston is not just a heartwarming local news story about a simple ride home. It is the ultimate, undeniable proof that the soft infrastructure of the American host nation is infinitely stronger than the rigid concrete fortresses of European football. The governing elites desperately tried to weaponize fear to maintain their cultural dominance. They wanted fans to stay away, or at least to arrive filled with suspicion and anxiety. But their multi-million-dollar fear campaign was completely defeated by a single stranger in a car on a rainy night. The manufactured stigma was completely washed away in the Houston rain. It exposed the exact reality the old guard fears most. They are terrified of a global fan base, realizing that the warmth and genuine care of the American people provide the ultimate safe haven. When fans experience this level of grassroots humanity, it renders the entire European protection racket completely and entirely useless. The fans realize they do not need the institutions to protect them from the world. The exact moment that car parked safely outside the accommodation in Midtown, it delivered a direct, fatal blow to the arrogant propaganda machine of the old continent. It proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that everything we were told was a deliberate lie designed to control us. So I have to ask you directly, right now, as someone watching this massive deception unfold, when you see how these powerful institutions have blatantly lied to manipulate your perception and dictate your fears, do you still trust the traditional football media to tell you the truth? Tell me exactly where you draw the line between an institution protecting fans and an institution manipulating them for power, because I am reading every single comment down below, and we need to expose this systemic lie together. In the long history of sports governance, host nations have routinely used billions of dollars in concrete and steel to hide their deep social fractures. We have seen tournaments where the ruling class builds towering monuments to their own ego, entirely ignoring the human cost on the ground. But as the matches of this 2026 tournament unfold across the continent right now, the current host nation is doing the exact opposite. The ruling elites of global football are accustomed to a very specific type of mega event. They are heavily used to tournaments where the physical infrastructure is magnificent, but the social distance between the local people and the visiting fans is vast, silent, and incredibly cold. The European establishment is perfectly comfortable with a world where fans remain completely isolated in strictly designated entertainment zones. They want you entirely dependent on the governing body for direction, for safety, and for your overall experience. They rely on massive social division and strict boundaries to maintain their absolute authority over the beautiful game. If the fans connect organically with the local culture, the institution loses its ultimate relevance. To understand the true scale of this deception, we must look at the deeply ingrained social conditioning of the European fan. A British tourist explicitly broke down this massive cultural shock regarding how success and positivity are treated back in his home country. He explained clearly that in the United Kingdom, if you are doing well in life, the people around you will look at you sideways. Personal wealth and individual success are immediately met with intense, bitter jealousy. It is actively condemned by the general public. People in the old continent simply do not celebrate each other on the street. They are conditioned to remain cold, entirely isolated, and highly suspicious of anyone stepping outside their assigned social rank. This toxic, cynical environment is exactly the cultural mindset the institutional elite desperately wants to project onto the entire world. They require a global fan base that is perpetually divided, highly jealous, and deeply cynical. A fearful fan is a highly compliant fan, but then this same British tourist arrived in the United States and experienced a total psychological collapse of that cynical European worldview. He could not believe the sheer reality of his daily interactions. He witnessed total strangers ready to show pure love and actively celebrate his personal wins right on the local pavement. He noticed immediately that the local people are profoundly more positive about life. They genuinely and passionately want to see each other succeed. Even when they do not know you at all, they approach you with an incredible warmth. They offer instant congratulations. They provide unsolicited advice on which hiking trail to explore, and they even warn you about aggressive local wildlife, like a massive moose. They distribute this profound human kindness completely free of charge. This welcoming nature is not a manufactured public relations campaign orchestrated by a wealthy committee in Switzerland. This is the organic, undeniable, everyday cultural reality of the American people. It is a reality the institutions tried extremely hard to hide from you. The undeniable evidence of this grassroots rebellion is absolutely everywhere. Alongside the immaculate streets of San Francisco, where locals welcome nervous tourists into pristine Victorian neighborhoods, the absolute truth about the host nation is finally emerging. Alongside the public lines in Texas, where strangers treat brand new arrivals like beloved members of a massive family, the carefully constructed narrative of fear is completely dissolving. Alongside the flooded avenues of Houston, where local residents rescue stranded Portuguese brothers from severe storms without asking for a single favor in return, the European monopoly on football culture is rapidly dying. Every single one of these organic human interactions is a devastating blow to the men who profit directly from your fear. The wealthy elites sitting in their secure boardrooms can control the staggering price of a match ticket, and they can completely monopolize the global television broadcasts, but they are entirely powerless against the welcoming smile of a stranger on a Texas sidewalk. The establishment has finally met a powerful force it cannot bribe or regulate. We have lived for far too long under the heavy shadow of the manufactured stigma. It is a carefully engineered, highly toxic illusion. It was designed entirely to keep the ultimate power centralized in the elite capitals of Europe. The governing bodies wanted you to look across the ocean at the United States and see a violent, uncaring, dystopian void. They wanted the two Portuguese brothers to stay terrified and locked inside their hotel rooms during the rain. They wanted the female British tourist in California to be entirely too scared to walk down Venice Beach and experience the local warmth. The establishment wanted to convince you that without their constant, overbearing supervision and protection, you would absolutely not survive the journey. They sold you a terrifying nightmare so they could turn around and sell you their incredibly expensive protection. It is the oldest institutional trick in the long history of power dynamics, but as this World Cup completely takes over the globe right now, the ultimate truth is completely undeniable to anyone paying attention. The real cultural power of this historic event does not exist in the luxury VIP boxes. It does not exist in the sterile, air-conditioned boardrooms in Nyon, nor does it exist in the arrogant television studios in London or Paris. It exists purely in the raw, unfiltered humanity of the American people on the ground. The massive cultural shock experienced by these European tourists is not just a pleasant reaction to good hospitality. It is the profound, earth-shattering realization that they have been lied to for their entire lives by the very sporting institutions they trusted the most. The loyal fans are finally waking up, and the powerful institutions are absolutely terrified of what happens next. When the final whistle of this massive tournament eventually blows, the world will be forced to accept a completely new geopolitical reality in football. The most powerful and enduring weapon of the host nation is not its massive commercial wealth or its gigantic, state-of-the-art stadiums. It is the unbreakable, deeply welcoming spirit of the everyday people standing on the street. You now have a fundamental, defining choice to make about how you view the future of this beautiful sport. You can choose to continue believing the wealthy executives and the cynical, fear-mongering newspapers in London who desperately want you to fear the outside world. Or you can choose to believe in that single car pulling over in the pouring rain in Houston Heights, offering immediate sanctuary and warmth to two stranded brothers in the dark. Which side of history will you stand on as this massive power dynamic shifts forever? If you want to keep watching this massive institutional lie unravel in real time, and if you want to stay present as we document the complete and total collapse of the old football establishment, you must join us right here. Subscribe and remain a loyal witness to the greatest cultural shift the sport has ever seen. This is not just a tournament. This is a reckoning.